The wedding planner assured us everything was perfect, then burst back into the dressing room with blood on her hands, saying there'd been an accident and we shouldn't believe what the caterer was about to tell police. Vanessa stood in the doorway with blood dripping from her fingers onto the cream carpet. Not splattered blood, not a cut from broken glass. This was the kind of blood that comes from being somewhere you shouldn't be, touching something you shouldn't touch. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in two perfect black lines, and her hands were shaking so violently I could hear her bracelets jangling from across the room. "There's been an accident in the kitchen," she said, her voice coming out in gasps. "The caterer is calling the police right now, and when they get here, she's going to tell them it was my fault. But it wasn't. You have to believe me. Whatever she says, whatever story she tells them, it's not true." My bridesmaids froze. Lindsay was holding my veil halfway to my head. Amber had been adjusting the bustle on my dress. Now they just stood there staring at Vanessa with their mouths open, while my wedding planner, the woman who'd spent 8 months planning every detail of this day, stood there covered in someone else's blood. "What happened?" I heard myself ask, even though part of me didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to push Vanessa out of the room, lock the door, and pretend the next 20 minutes weren't about to happen. "Is someone hurt?" Vanessa's laugh came out wrong, too high and sharp. "The sous chef, Thomas. He's not breathing. I tried to help him, but there was so much blood and Rachel was screaming at me to get away from him, and now she's telling everyone I pushed him, but I didn't. I swear to God I didn't push him." She took 3 steps into the room and grabbed my shoulders, leaving red handprints on the white lace of my dress. "You know me, Claire. You've known me for 8 months. Do you really think I would hurt someone?" I looked down at the blood soaking into the fabric. Each print showed 5 distinct fingers. The stains were already spreading, bleeding into the intricate beadwork my mother had spent $2,000 on. Behind Vanessa, I could hear shouting from somewhere in the venue. Multiple voices, all talking over each other. Amber moved first, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling 911. Vanessa spun toward her. "No, don't. Please don't. Just give me 5 minutes to explain what really happened before the police get here and Rachel poisons them against me." She looked at me again, desperate. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Lindsay stepped between us. "If someone's hurt, we're calling for help. Get away from the bride." But Vanessa didn't move. She just stood there with her bloody hands hanging at her sides, and I noticed for the first time that she had scratches on her arms, deep ones that looked fresh. "Rachel did this to me," she said, noticing where I was looking. "In the kitchen after it happened. She attacked me and told me she was going to make sure I went to prison for murder." The word hung in the air between us. Murder. Not accident. Not injury. Murder. My phone started ringing. I pulled it from my clutch and saw it was my mother calling from downstairs where she was supposed to be greeting guests. I answered on speaker. "Claire, honey, there's something happening in the kitchen. The caterer just ran out saying someone's dead and your wedding planner killed him. The police are on their way and some of the guests are starting to leave. What do you want me to do?" Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. "She's lying. Rachel is lying. You have to believe me." I looked at my dress, at the blood that was never going to come out. I looked at Vanessa, who'd organized every detail of this day with obsessive precision, who'd negotiated with vendors and solved problems and made everything perfect. I looked at my bridesmaids, who were backing toward the far corner of the room. "Mom," I said slowly, "tell the guests the ceremony is delayed. Don't let anyone leave yet." I hung up before she could argue. Vanessa was crying now, really crying, her whole body shaking. "Thank you. Thank you. I can explain everything if you just listen." Lindsay grabbed my arm. "Claire, we need to get out of this room right now. She just admitted someone died." But I pulled away from her. Something about this wasn't adding up. "How did you get blood on your hands if you didn't touch him?" Vanessa wiped her face, smearing the mascara worse. "I did touch him. When I found him, he was still alive. Barely. There was a knife on the floor next to him and blood everywhere, and he was trying to talk, but he couldn't get words out. I knelt down and tried to stop the bleeding. I pressed my hands against the wound in his chest. I didn't know what else to do." She demonstrated with her shaking hands, pressing them against her own chest. "That's when Rachel came in. She started screaming that I'd stabbed him, that she'd seen me do it. But she's lying. I wasn't even in the kitchen when it happened. I was in the wine cellar checking on the champagne order." Amber had her phone out, finger hovering over the call button. "This is insane. We need to call the police right now." Vanessa's eyes went wide. "They're already coming. That's the problem. Rachel called them the second I tried to help Thomas. She told them I did it before I could even explain what I saw." She turned back to me. "Claire, I need you to tell the police that I've been with you all morning, that I never left your sight." The request hit me like cold water. You want me to lie to the police? Vanessa grabbed my hands, getting more blood on me. I'm asking you to give me an alibi until I can prove what really happened. Rachel has a history with Thomas. They dated last year and it ended badly. She's been harassing him for months. I've seen the text messages he showed me. Threats, stalking, the whole thing. But if the police show up and she tells them I did it first, they're going to arrest me before I can show them the evidence. Lindsay pulled out her own phone and started typing. I'm looking up Rachel's catering company right now. Let's see if there's anything about her online. Vanessa watched her frantically. You won't find anything. She's careful. She makes sure everything looks professional on the surface. But ask anyone who's worked with her. Ask the vendors. They'll tell you she's unstable. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. My mother called again. I let it go to voicemail. If you didn't do anything wrong, I said carefully, then you should just tell the police the truth. Vanessa's expression shifted into something harder. The truth? The truth is that I've been planning weddings in this city for 12 years and Rachel has been trying to destroy my business for the last 2. She's told lies about me to other vendors, tried to steal my clients, posted fake reviews online. This is just her next move. She saw an opportunity and she took it. Amber looked up from her phone. There's nothing about harassment or stalking, but there are 3 complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau against Serenity Events. That's your company, right, Vanessa? The blood drained from Vanessa's face. Those were all lies. Rachel filed those herself under fake names. I had them investigated. Lindsay showed me her phone screen. This article from 6 months ago says a client accused you of stealing money from their wedding budget. The case was settled out of court. Vanessa's hands clenched into fists. I didn't steal anything. That couple had unrealistic expectations, and when I couldn't deliver what they wanted, they tried to blame me. I had to settle because going to court would have cost more than just paying them off. The sirens were right outside now. I could hear car doors slamming, radio chatter, heavy footsteps on the stairs. Vanessa's eyes darted to the door, then back to me. Please, Claire, I'm begging you. Just tell them I was with you. Give me time to get a lawyer, to show them the evidence about Rachel. If they arrest me right now, I'll lose everything. My business, my reputation, my freedom. Amber moved toward the door. I'm letting the police in. Vanessa lunged forward and grabbed her arm, yanking her back. Don't. Her voice came out as a growl. For the first time, I felt actual fear. This wasn't the composed wedding planner I'd met 8 months ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone desperate and dangerous. Lindsay stepped between them. Let her go, right now. But Vanessa's grip tightened. I need 5 more minutes. That's all. 5 minutes to figure out what to say. Heavy fists pounded on the door. Police, open up. Vanessa finally released Amber's arm, leaving red marks where her fingers had been. She backed toward the window, her eyes wild. Vanessa, I said as calmly as I could manage, you need to open the door and talk to them. Running will just make you look guilty. She laughed again, that same wrong sound. I already look guilty. I'm covered in blood, standing in the bride's room, and the caterer is downstairs telling everyone I'm a murderer. How exactly does this get better for me? The door handle rattled. Open this door now or we're coming in. Vanessa looked at the window again. We were on the 2nd floor. Not high enough to kill her if she jumped, but high enough to break bones. Don't, I said. She met my eyes one more time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ruined your wedding, but I'm not going to prison for something I didn't do. She grabbed a chair and smashed it through the window. Glass exploded outward, glittering in the afternoon sun. Before anyone could stop her, she climbed onto the sill. Vanessa, stop, Lindsay screamed. But she didn't stop. She jumped. The sound of her landing was worse than I expected. Not a clean thud, but a complicated series of cracks and crunches followed by screaming. The police kicked in the door 3 seconds later, guns drawn. They took in the scene, the broken window, the blood on my dress, my bridesmaids huddled in the corner, and immediately radioed for backup. She went out the window, Amber said, pointing. Her voice was shaking. The wedding planner. She was covered in blood and said the caterer was lying about her. 2 officers rushed to the window while another approached me. Are you injured, ma'am? I looked down at the blood on my dress, on my hands where Vanessa had grabbed me. It's not mine. It's from Thomas, the sous chef. Is he really dead? The officer's expression told me everything I needed to know before he spoke. The EMTs are working on him now, but it doesn't look good. Where exactly did the suspect go? I pointed to the window. We could hear more shouting from outside, more sirens arriving. The officer keyed his radio. Suspect jumped from 2nd-story window, east side of building. She's injured but conscious. Get EMTs over there. He turned back to me. I need you and your friends to stay here while we secure the scene. Someone will come take your statements. He left, and we were alone in the ruined dressing room. Glass covered the floor. Blood stained the carpet. My wedding dress was destroyed. Lindsay was crying. Amber was frozen, staring at the broken window. I sat down on the chair Vanessa hadn't smashed and tried to process what had just happened. My phone rang again. My mother. I answered. Is it true? Did Vanessa really kill someone? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? Claire, honey, the guests are panicking. Half of them have already left. Your father is trying to calm everyone down, but people are saying the wedding is cursed. What do you want us to do? I looked at Amber and Lindsay, at the blood everywhere, at the shattered window. Cancel it, I heard myself say. Cancel everything. My mother started to argue, but I hung up. I couldn't deal with logistics right now. Couldn't think about deposits and cancellation fees and disappointed relatives. Someone had died. That was the only thing that mattered. A female officer appeared in the doorway, her expression gentle but professional. I'm Officer Nguyen. I need to take your statements individually. Which of you is the bride? I raised my hand like I was in school. She gestured for me to follow her into the hallway. Behind me, I could hear Lindsay sobbing and Amber trying to comfort her. The hallway was chaos. Police officers everywhere, crime scene tape being strung up, EMTs rushing past with equipment. Through a window, I could see Vanessa on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face. Her legs were bent at wrong angles. Officer Nguyen led me to a small office away from the commotion and closed the door. The sudden quiet was almost worse than the noise. I know this is difficult, she said, pulling out a notepad, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened from the moment Vanessa entered your dressing room. I told her everything I could remember. The blood on Vanessa's hands, her claim that Rachel was lying, the scratches on her arms, the way she'd grabbed Amber when we tried to call 911. Officer Nguyen wrote it all down without interrupting. When I finished, she looked up. Did Vanessa say anything that suggested she was the one who attacked Thomas? I thought about it carefully. She said she found him and tried to help, that she pressed her hands against his chest wound to stop the bleeding. But she also asked me to lie and say she'd been with me all morning. Officer Nguyen made a note. The caterer, Rachel, is giving a very different account. She says she witnessed Vanessa stab Thomas. My stomach turned. Vanessa told me Rachel was the one with the history with Thomas, that Rachel had been stalking him. Officer Nguyen's expression didn't change. We'll be investigating all of that. Right now, I need to know if Vanessa made any threats, showed any violent behavior while she was in your dressing room. I thought about the moment Vanessa had grabbed Amber's arm, the desperation in her eyes, the way her whole demeanor had changed. She grabbed my bridesmaid when Amber tried to call 911, hard enough to leave marks, and she asked me multiple times to lie to the police for her. Officer Nguyen wrote that down. Did she say why she wanted you to lie specifically? She said Rachel was trying to frame her, that if I gave her an alibi, she'd have time to prove Rachel was the real attacker. The words sounded hollow even as I said them. Officer Nguyen closed her notebook. I need to keep your dress as evidence. We'll need to photograph the blood pattern. Someone will bring you something else to wear. She stood up. I know this isn't what you expected for your wedding day. I'm sorry. After she left, I sat alone in the office and stared at my hands. Vanessa's blood was still under my fingernails. I felt numb, disconnected from my own body. This morning I'd been worrying about whether my makeup looked good, and if the flowers would arrive on time. A knock on the door made me jump. My fiancé, David, burst in and pulled me into his arms. Are you okay? They wouldn't let me up here. I've been going crazy waiting for news. I pressed my face against his chest. He smelled like his cologne and the coffee he'd been drinking while getting ready with his groomsmen. Normal smells from a normal morning that felt like it had happened years ago instead of hours. Someone died, I whispered. Thomas, the sous chef. Vanessa, she killed him, I think. Or Rachel did. I don't know what's true anymore. David held me tighter. The police will figure it out. That's not your responsibility. But it felt like my responsibility. This was my wedding. These were vendors I'd hired. If I'd done more research, checked references more carefully, maybe I would have known Vanessa was unstable. Maybe Thomas would still be alive. Don't, David said, reading my mind. Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have known. But could I have? Were there signs I'd missed? Over the next hour, more details emerged. Thomas had died before the ambulance even arrived. The knife wound had severed a major artery. He'd bled out within minutes. Vanessa was in surgery for her shattered legs and pelvis. She'd be in the hospital for weeks, then in police custody once she was stable enough to be moved. Rachel was being interviewed by detectives. My parents had sent the remaining guests home and were dealing with the venue manager about what happened next. The wedding was officially canceled. Deposits were lost. The band, the photographer, the florist, all of them had packed up and left. My mother called again. Honey, I need to know what you want to do with the flowers. The venue is asking if we want to donate them somewhere or if they should just dispose of them. I couldn't make my brain care about flowers. I don't know, Mom. Whatever you think is best. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? Do you need me to come up there? No. Stay with Dad. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was sitting in a stranger's office wearing a blood-stained wedding dress while police investigated a murder that happened at what should have been the happiest day of my life. A victim's advocate arrived, a woman named Susan with kind eyes and a calm voice. She explained what would happen next. The investigation, the potential trial, the media attention. This is going to be news, she said gently. A murder at a wedding. The press will want to talk to you. I'd advise not giving any interviews until after the investigation is complete. She gave me resources for trauma counseling, support groups for people affected by violent crime, her personal cell phone number if I needed anything. Then she left, and I was alone again with my thoughts. Officer Nguyen came back with clothes someone had retrieved from my car. A pair of jeans and a t-shirt I'd planned to change into for the after-party that would never happen. You can get changed in here. We'll bag your dress and everything else as evidence. She stepped outside to give me privacy. I stripped off the ruined dress and stood there in my underwear looking at the blood that had soaked through to my skin. Vanessa's handprints were still visible on my shoulders. I used wet paper towels from the office bathroom to scrub them away, but the staining remained. I pulled on the jeans and t-shirt and felt like a different person. Not a bride, just someone who'd witnessed something terrible. Officer Nguyen took the dress in an evidence bag and told me I was free to go. We'll be in touch if we have more questions. Detective Willis will be the lead investigator. He'll probably want to interview you more formally in the next few days. David was waiting for me in the hallway. We walked out of the venue together, past the crime scene tape and the police cars and the few remaining onlookers filming on their phones. Our car was in the parking lot where we'd left it this morning, decorated with "Just Married" written in window paint and tin cans tied to the bumper. David pulled off the cans without a word while I scraped away the paint with my fingernails. The drive home was silent. What was there to say? When we pulled into David's apartment complex, I saw my parents' car already parked there. They'd let themselves in with the spare key and had coffee brewing. My mother took one look at me and started crying. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But it hadn't happened to me. It had happened to Thomas, who was dead. To Rachel, who'd witnessed something terrible. To Vanessa, whose life was over whether she was guilty or not. I'd just been collateral damage. We sat around David's kitchen table while my father made phone calls to cancel the honeymoon, to deal with the wedding vendors, to handle all the practical details that came with a canceled wedding and a murder investigation. My mother kept touching my hand, my arm, my hair, like she needed to confirm I was really there and really okay. Did you know? She asked finally. About Vanessa? Were there any signs that she was capable of something like this? I thought about every interaction I'd had with Vanessa over 8 months. The first meeting where she'd shown me her portfolio, glossy photos of perfect weddings, the venue tours where she'd taken notes on everything, the vendor meetings where she'd negotiated prices and timelines, the tasting where she'd insisted everything be exactly right, the dress shopping where she'd cried when I found the one. Had she seemed unstable? Obsessive maybe, but I'd thought that was just her being thorough. I don't know, I said honestly. She seemed professional, intense about details, but that's what I wanted. Someone who would make sure everything was perfect. My mother squeezed my hand. This isn't your fault. You know that, right? But I wasn't sure I did know that. Over the next few days, the story consumed the news. Murder at wedding, the headline screamed. Bride escapes death as wedding planner goes on rampage. The details got more sensational with each retelling. Some articles claimed Vanessa had tried to attack me. Others said there had been a love triangle between Vanessa, Thomas, and Rachel. None of them got it quite right, but the truth was messy and incomplete. Detective Willis called and asked me to come to the station for a formal interview. David came with me. We sat in a gray room with a two-way mirror while Willis asked me the same questions Officer Nguyen had asked, but in more detail. Walk me through your relationship with Vanessa from the beginning. When did you first contact her? I explained how I'd found her company online, how her reviews had been mostly positive, how she'd seemed like the perfect choice. Did you check her references? I nodded. She gave me 3 couples she'd worked with. I called all of them. They all said she did a great job. Willis made a note. We've contacted those references. They confirm that Vanessa did plan their wedding successfully. No complaints, no problems. But we've also found other clients who had negative experiences. He pulled out a folder and opened it. In the past 3 years, Vanessa has been sued twice. Once for breach of contract when she failed to show up to a wedding, and once for misappropriation of funds when she allegedly pocketed deposits that were supposed to go to vendors. My stomach dropped. I didn't know about any of that. None of that showed up in my research. Willis nodded. Both cases were settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. The clients couldn't talk about it publicly. That's why you wouldn't have found them in reviews or complaints. He flipped through more pages. We've also found a pattern of obsessive behavior. Vanessa has filed restraining order requests against 3 different people in the past 2 years, claiming they were harassing her. All 3 requests were denied because there was no evidence of harassment. The judge in the most recent case noted that Vanessa appeared to be the aggressor in the situation. I thought about how Vanessa had claimed Rachel was stalking Thomas, how she'd insisted the negative reviews were fake, how she'd blamed everyone else for her problems. What about the restraining order she mentioned? The one Thomas supposedly filed against Rachel? Willis's expression was grim. There is no restraining order against Rachel, but Thomas did file one against Vanessa 2 months ago. The room felt too small suddenly. Vanessa told me Rachel and Thomas used to date. Was that true? Willis shook his head. Rachel and Thomas were colleagues, friends, but nothing romantic. Vanessa and Thomas did date briefly last fall. According to Thomas's friends, he broke it off after 3 weeks because Vanessa was too intense. She showed up at his apartment uninvited, sent him hundreds of messages a day, called his mother, his friends, his employer. When he blocked her on social media, she created fake accounts to keep contacting him. That's when he filed for the restraining order. I felt sick. Every single thing Vanessa had told me was a lie. The restraining order prohibited Vanessa from coming within 500 feet of Thomas, Willis continued, but she violated it multiple times, showed up at restaurants where he was eating, followed him to the gym, waited outside his apartment. Each time, Thomas documented it and reported it to us, but we hadn't made an arrest yet. We were building a case for stalking charges. David spoke for the first time. So, Vanessa knew Thomas was going to be working at our wedding? Willis nodded. According to Rachel's statement, Vanessa called her 2 weeks ago asking specifically who would be on the kitchen staff for your event. Rachel told her Thomas would be the sous chef. 3 days later, Rachel got an anonymous email saying Thomas was stealing from her company and she should fire him. Rachel traced the email back to Vanessa. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that made me feel complicit somehow. Vanessa was planning this, I said slowly. She knew Thomas would be there. She wanted him there. Willis leaned forward. We believe Vanessa saw your wedding as an opportunity. She had legitimate access to the venue, to the kitchen area. She could get close to Thomas without it seeming suspicious. And if something happened to him, there would be hundreds of people to point fingers at. I thought about how Vanessa had insisted on the specific catering company, how she'd said Rachel was the best in the city and we had to use her. I'd thought she was just being thorough, but she'd been setting this up from the beginning. Rachel didn't know about Vanessa's history with Thomas, Willis said. She thought Vanessa was just another wedding planner she'd worked with before. She had no reason to suspect anything was wrong until she found Thomas bleeding on the kitchen floor with Vanessa kneeling over him. David's hand found mine under the table. What happens now? Willis closed his folder. Vanessa is still in the hospital, but once she's stable, we'll be charging her with first-degree murder. The evidence is overwhelming. We have the knife with her fingerprints on it. We have security footage showing her entering the kitchen storage room where Thomas was found. We have the restraining order she violated by being there. We have her pattern of stalking and harassment, and we have Rachel's eyewitness testimony. He looked at me. We'll need you to testify about what Vanessa said in your dressing room. How she asked you to lie for her. How she tried to frame Rachel. Your testimony will be crucial in establishing consciousness of guilt. The thought of testifying, of standing in a courtroom and reliving this day, made me want to throw up. But I nodded. I'll do whatever you need me to do. After the interview, David and I sat in his car in the police station parking lot. I hired her, I said. I brought her into our lives. If I'd done better research, if I'd checked more carefully, Thomas would still be alive. David turned to face me. Claire, you did check. You called references. You looked at reviews. You did everything a normal person would do. Vanessa manipulated the system. She hid her past. That's not your fault. But it felt like my fault. It felt like I should have seen something, noticed something, asked better questions. The guilt sat in my chest like a stone. Over the next 2 weeks, more information came out. The police found a notebook in Vanessa's car with pages of notes about Thomas. His schedule, his routines, his favorite places. She'd been planning this for months. They also found drafts of social media posts Vanessa had written but never published, accusing Thomas of abuse, of assault, of ruining her life. None of it was true, but she'd been building a narrative to justify what she was planning to do. Thomas's family held his funeral on a cold morning 2 weeks after the murder. David and I debated whether to go. We hadn't known Thomas personally. Would it be intrusive? Disrespectful? But in the end, we went. The church was packed with Thomas's friends, his family, his colleagues from the restaurant industry. Rachel sat in the front row with Thomas's mother. I recognized some of the other chefs from the catering company. Thomas's mother gave a eulogy that broke my heart. She talked about her son's passion for cooking, how he'd wanted to open his own restaurant someday, how he'd been saving money, planning, dreaming, how all of that was gone now because someone couldn't accept that he didn't love her back. After the service, I approached Thomas's mother. I'd been dreading this moment all morning. What do you say to someone whose son died at your wedding? I'm Claire, I said quietly. The bride. I'm so sorry about what happened. I'm so sorry about Thomas. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I braced myself for anger, for blame. But she pulled me into a hug. Thank you for coming, and thank you for telling the truth about what Vanessa said to you. The detective told me you didn't lie for her. I started crying. I couldn't help it. I should have known. I should have seen something was wrong with her. Thomas's mother pulled back and held my shoulders, looking me directly in the eyes. My son's death is not your fault. It's Vanessa's fault. She fooled a lot of people. She was good at hiding what she really was. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photo, handing it to me. It showed Thomas in a chef's coat, grinning at the camera with a whisk in his hand. He loved what he did. He was excited about your wedding. He called me the day before and told me about the menu he'd designed. He said it was going to be his best work. I looked at the photo, at Thomas's smile, at the life that had been stolen from him. I wanted you to know that, his mother continued. What happened wasn't because of your wedding. It was because of Vanessa. Thomas would want you to understand that. I held onto that photo like a lifeline. Later, David and I donated $10,000 to a culinary scholarship fund Thomas's family had started in his name. It didn't bring him back, but it felt like something we could do. 3 months after the murder, Vanessa was released from the hospital and immediately arrested. The news showed footage of her being wheeled out in a wheelchair, her legs still in casts, surrounded by police officers. She was charged with first-degree murder, stalking, and multiple counts of violating a restraining order. Her arraignment was brief. She pleaded not guilty, which everyone expected. Her lawyer, a public defender named Gregory Paulson, argued that Vanessa had been defending herself against Thomas, that she had a history of mental illness that made her not fully responsible for her actions. The judge wasn't buying it. Bail was set at $2 million, which Vanessa couldn't pay. She'd remain in jail until trial. I watched the arraignment on the news from David's apartment. We'd been living together since the wedding that never happened, neither of us able to face our own apartments alone. She's pleading not guilty, I said to the television screen. After everything, she's still lying. David put his arm around me. Her lawyer has to mount some kind of defense. But Willis said the evidence is overwhelming. She's going to be convicted. I wanted to believe that, but I'd learned that justice wasn't always guaranteed. Vanessa's trial was scheduled for the following spring, 8 months away. 8 months of waiting, of wondering, of living with the weight of what had happened. In the meantime, I went to therapy twice a week. My therapist, Dr. Ellen, specialized in trauma. She helped me work through the guilt, the fear, the intrusive thoughts that kept me awake at night. You're experiencing a form of survivor's guilt, she explained during one session. You feel like you should have prevented Thomas's death, even though logically you know you couldn't have. I knew she was right. But knowing it logically didn't stop the feelings. I couldn't look at wedding photos anymore. Couldn't watch romantic comedies that ended with big white weddings. Couldn't even go to the grocery store without having a panic attack if I saw flowers or champagne or anything else that reminded me of that day. David was patient with me, more patient than I probably deserved. We'd postponed all talk of actually getting married. The thought of planning another wedding, of hiring vendors, of trusting anyone with that kind of responsibility was impossible. 4 months after the murder, I received a letter in the mail. Prison return address. Vanessa. My hands shook as I held the envelope. Part of me wanted to throw it away without reading it, but I needed to know what she had to say. Inside was 3 pages, handwritten in Vanessa's careful script. Dear Claire, I know you probably hate me. I know everyone does. But I need you to understand what really happened that day. I never meant to hurt Thomas. I loved him. I loved him so much it felt like dying when he rejected me. For months, I tried to get him to see that we belonged together. I sent him messages explaining my feelings, gifts to show him I cared, showed up places where I knew he'd be so he could see how perfect we were for each other. But he kept pushing me away. He got that restraining order like I was some kind of criminal instead of someone who just loved him. When I found out he'd be working your wedding, I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe if he saw me in my professional element, being successful and confident, he'd realize what he was missing. I wasn't planning anything bad. I just wanted to talk to him. I read faster, my anger building with each line. But when I went to the kitchen to find him, he was rude. He told me to leave or he'd call the police. He said he never wanted to see me again, that I needed to get help, that I was obsessed. The way he said it, like I was pathetic, it made something inside me snap. There was a knife on the counter. I picked it up. I just wanted him to take me seriously, to stop dismissing me. But he laughed. He actually laughed at me holding a knife. So I did it. I stabbed him. Once, then again when he didn't fall down. The look on his face changed from laughing to shocked to scared. That's when I realized what I'd done. I tried to help him. I tried to stop the bleeding. But there was so much blood and he kept gasping, and then Rachel was there screaming at me. I panicked. I ran to your dressing room because I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could get you to vouch for me, if I could explain that it was self-defense, maybe I could get out of this. But you wouldn't help me. None of you would. So I jumped out that window because I knew my life was over either way. The letter went on for another page, full of justifications and excuses and self-pity. At the end, she wrote, "I'm sorry I ruined your wedding. That was never part of the plan. But you have to understand, I'm not a murderer. I'm just someone who loved too much." I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling more disgusted. Vanessa was still blaming everyone else, still claiming she was the victim, still refusing to take responsibility for murdering someone. I called Detective Willis and told him about the letter. "That's essentially a confession," he said, sounding pleased. "She admitted to stabbing Thomas. Her lawyer is going to be furious. Can you send me a copy?" I did better than that. I gave him the original. Vanessa's confession, in her own handwriting, became a key piece of evidence. Her lawyer tried to have it suppressed, arguing that Vanessa hadn't been properly advised about not communicating with witnesses, but the judge denied the motion. The trial date was moved up. With Vanessa's confession in writing, the prosecutor felt confident they could get a quick conviction. 5 months after Thomas's death, the trial began. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, Thomas's family and friends. David and I sat in the gallery, holding hands, as the prosecutor laid out the case. The evidence was damning. The knife with Vanessa's fingerprints, the security footage showing her entering the kitchen, the restraining order she'd violated, the notebook full of obsessive notes about Thomas, his mother's testimony about the threatening calls Vanessa had made, Rachel's testimony about finding Vanessa kneeling over Thomas's body, and Vanessa's own confession in the letter she'd sent me. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my heart pounding. Vanessa sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. She'd lost weight in jail. Her hair was limp and her skin was pale. She didn't look dangerous. She looked pathetic. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Karen Liu, asked me to describe what happened in the dressing room. I told the jury about Vanessa bursting in covered in blood, about her asking me to lie for her, about how she'd grabbed Amber and refused to let us call 911. "Did Vanessa explain why she wanted you to give her an alibi?" Liu asked. "She said Rachel was lying about what happened, that Rachel was the one who had problems with Thomas, not her." Liu nodded. "Did you believe her at the time?" I thought about my answer carefully. Part of me wanted to believe her. She'd been my wedding planner for 8 months. I trusted her. But the blood on her hands, the desperation in her voice, something felt wrong. Liu showed me a copy of the letter Vanessa had sent me. "Is this the letter you received from the defendant while she was in jail?" I confirmed it was. Liu read selected passages to the jury, emphasizing the parts where Vanessa admitted to stabbing Thomas. When Liu finished, Vanessa's lawyer, Gregory Paulson, stood for cross-examination. He was young and looked overwhelmed. "Miss Clare, in the dressing room, did Vanessa threaten you directly?" I thought about it. "She grabbed my shoulders and left blood on my dress. She grabbed my bridesmaid's arm hard enough to leave marks, but she didn't explicitly threaten violence." Paulson pounced on that. "So she didn't say she was going to hurt you?" "No, but she asked me to lie to the police and tried to stop us from calling for help. That felt threatening." Paulson tried a few more questions, attempting to paint Vanessa as someone having a mental breakdown rather than a calculating murderer, but it didn't land. The jury looked unconvinced. When I stepped down, Thomas's mother caught my eye and nodded. I'd told the truth. That was all I could do. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, claimed she'd had a psychotic break brought on by rejection and obsession. But the prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation. The notebook where Vanessa had planned how to get close to Thomas. The fact that she'd specifically chosen our wedding because she knew he'd be there. The multiple violations of the restraining order in the weeks leading up to the murder. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated stalking that had escalated to murder. Vanessa herself testified, which her lawyer had advised against. She sat in the witness box and told her version of events, crying as she described her love for Thomas, how he'd misunderstood her intentions, how she'd only wanted to talk to him that day. "I never meant to hurt him," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I loved him so much. When he laughed at me, when he made me feel small and worthless, something inside me just broke. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't myself." Karen Lou destroyed her on cross-examination. She pulled out printouts of the hundreds of messages Vanessa had sent Thomas after he'd asked her to stop contacting him. Messages that started as declarations of love and gradually became threats. "If I can't have you, no one will. You'll regret treating me this way. You think you can just throw me away? Watch what happens." "Miss Vanessa," Lou said coldly, "these messages were sent over a period of 3 months. That's not a momentary break. That's a pattern of escalating threats." Vanessa had no good answer. Lou pressed harder. "You knew Thomas would be at Claire's wedding, correct?" Vanessa nodded. "You specifically asked Rachel who would be working that day." Another nod. "And 3 days later, you sent Rachel an anonymous email accusing Thomas of theft, hoping she'd fire him before the wedding." Vanessa's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. "Answer the question," the judge said. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." Lou held up a printout. "We traced that email to your IP address. You weren't trying to protect Rachel or the company. You were trying to get Thomas fired because you realized your plan to confront him at the wedding might not work if he was actually there." The jury was watching intently. "Your testimony is that you grabbed the knife in self-defense, correct?" Vanessa nodded. "But Thomas was unarmed. He was standing near a prep station doing his job. He never touched you, never threatened you. You grabbed that knife and you stabbed him because he'd rejected you and you couldn't handle it." Vanessa broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Her lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The jury had seen everything they needed to see. Closing arguments were brief. Liu laid out the evidence methodically. The stalking, the violated restraining order, the premeditation, the murder itself, the attempt to frame Rachel, the confession in the letter. Vanessa didn't snap, Liu told the jury. She planned, she executed. And when she got caught, she tried to destroy an innocent woman's life to save herself. This is not a woman who deserves your sympathy. This is a woman who deserves to spend the rest of her life in prison. Paulson did his best to paint Vanessa as mentally ill, as someone who needed treatment, not punishment. But his heart wasn't in it. Even he seemed to know it was hopeless. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. "We find the defendant, Vanessa Elizabeth Stone, guilty of murder in the 1st degree." Vanessa collapsed in her chair. Thomas's mother sobbed with relief. "I felt nothing but exhaustion." Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen too many cases of violence against women to have any patience for Vanessa's claims of being a victim herself. "Miss Stone," she said, looking down at Vanessa from the bench, "you stalked an innocent man who'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with you. You violated a restraining order designed to protect him. You planned to confront him at a wedding where he was simply trying to do his job, and when he rejected you again, you murdered him. Then you tried to frame an innocent woman for your crime. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the magnitude of what you've done." Thomas's mother was allowed to give a victim impact statement. She stood at a podium facing Vanessa and spoke in a voice that shook with grief and anger. "You took my son from me. You took his future, his dreams, everything he could have been. Thomas was kind and talented and loved by everyone who knew him. He didn't deserve to die because he didn't want to date you. No one deserves that." She pulled out a photo of Thomas, the same one she'd shown me at the funeral. "This is who my son was. A chef who loved his work. A son who called his mother every week. A friend who would do anything for the people he cared about. You reduced him to a crime scene photo. You made his last moments terrifying and painful." She turned to address the judge. "I'm asking you to give this woman the maximum sentence. Let her spend the rest of her life knowing she'll never have the freedom my son would have had. Let her sit in a cell and think about what she did every single day." The judge nodded. She turned back to Vanessa. "I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will die in prison, Miss Stone. That is what you have earned." Vanessa didn't react. She just sat there, blank and hollow, as the bailiff led her away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I gave a brief statement. Justice was served today. Thomas's family can have some closure. That's all that matters. David and I went home and sat in silence for a long time. It was over. Finally over. But it didn't feel like victory. Thomas was still dead. My wedding was still ruined. Vanessa's life was destroyed. Everyone had lost something. Over the following months, I slowly started to rebuild my life. I went back to work at the marketing firm where I'd been employed before the wedding. My coworkers were supportive but awkward, not sure what to say to someone who'd experienced what I had. David and I got married quietly at the courthouse 6 months after the trial. Just us, our parents, and a judge. No reception, no fanfare, no vendors. It was perfect in its simplicity. We went out for pizza afterward, and it felt right. Safe. Nothing could go wrong at a pizza place. Thomas's mother, whose name I'd learned was Dorothy, stayed in touch. We had coffee every few months. She told me about the scholarship fund, about the culinary students who were receiving aid in Thomas's name. It helped her, she said, to know that something good was coming from her son's death. I started volunteering with a victims' rights organization, helping other people navigate the aftermath of violent crime. I couldn't save Thomas, but maybe I could help someone else. The nightmares faded gradually. The panic attacks became less frequent. I could walk past wedding boutiques without my chest tightening, could see flowers without seeing blood. David and I even talked about maybe having a real wedding someday, when enough time had passed. But we weren't in a hurry. What we had was enough. 2 years after Thomas's murder, I received another letter from Vanessa. This one was different. Shorter, more subdued. I know you'll probably never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed to tell you that I understand now what I did. I killed someone. I ended Thomas's life because I couldn't handle rejection. That was wrong. It was evil. I'm not asking for sympathy or understanding. I just wanted you to know that I'm not making excuses anymore. I know what I am. I read it once and filed it away. I didn't respond. What was there to say? The prison system sent me notifications that Vanessa would be eligible for parole review in 25 years. Though with a life without parole sentence, it was largely symbolic. I planned to be at every hearing, along with Dorothy and Rachel, and anyone else whose life Vanessa had damaged. She would never walk free if we had anything to say about it. 3 years after the murder, David and I had our first child, a daughter we named Hope. Dorothy was one of the first people we called. She came to the hospital and held our baby and cried tears that were both happy and sad. Thomas would have loved to meet her, she said softly. I thought about that often as Hope grew. How Thomas would never have children, never hold his own daughter, never experience any of the joys that came after the age of 28. Because Vanessa had decided her feelings mattered more than his life. The wedding that never happened became a story I told Hope when she was old enough to understand. A story about how people aren't always what they seem, how obsession can turn deadly, how important it is to believe victims when they say they're being stalked or harassed. I wanted her to learn from what happened, to be vigilant, to trust her instincts, to never dismiss someone's concerns as overreaction. 5 years after the murder, a documentary crew contacted me about doing a show on wedding industry disasters. I declined. This wasn't entertainment, it was tragedy. But I did agree to speak to a journalist writing a book about stalking and domestic violence. My story became a chapter, one example among many of how restraining orders often aren't enough, how the system fails victims until it's too late. The book was dedicated to Thomas. I attended the launch party and met other families who'd lost loved ones to stalkers and obsessed ex-partners. We formed a strange kind of community, bonded by grief and anger and determination to change the laws that had failed our people. Some of us testified before state legislatures, pushing for stronger stalking laws, better enforcement of restraining orders, more resources for victims. Small victories, incremental changes, but it felt like doing something. Dorothy started a foundation in Thomas's name, not just for culinary scholarships, but for stalking victims who needed legal help, security systems, relocation assistance. I served on the board. We raised money, helped people, saved lives. It didn't bring Thomas back, but it honored his memory. I thought about Vanessa sometimes, sitting in her cell. Did she really understand what she'd done? Or was her letter just another manipulation, another attempt to portray herself as sympathetic? I'd never know. And ultimately, it didn't matter. She was where she belonged. 10 years after the murder, Hope was old enough to ask questions. Mommy, why don't you have any wedding photos? I'd been dreading this conversation. David and I exchanged a glance and I took a deep breath. We did have a wedding planned once, but something bad happened that day and we canceled it. We got married later at the courthouse instead. Hope's eyes went wide. What bad thing? I kept it simple. Someone got hurt. It wasn't safe to have the wedding anymore. She accepted that explanation for the time being. Later, when she was older, I'd tell her the whole story. But for now, she was just a little girl who didn't need to know about murder and obsession and blood on white lace. Dorothy passed away when Hope was 12, her heart finally giving out after years of grief. At her funeral, dozens of culinary students she'd helped came to pay their respects. Young chefs who wouldn't have been able to afford school without Thomas's scholarship fund. His legacy lived on through them. I gave a eulogy, talking about Dorothy's strength, her grace, her determination to create something good from unspeakable tragedy. The foundation continued without her, run by her sister and a board of dedicated volunteers. Vanessa sent a sympathy card when she heard about Dorothy's death. I threw it away without reading it. 15 years after the murder, Hope was in high school and doing a project on criminal justice reform. She asked me directly about what had happened at my wedding. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face getting paler as the story progressed. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "That's horrible," she finally said. "That poor guy. And you had to see all of that." I nodded. It was the worst day of my life. But it taught me important things. About trusting my instincts, about taking stalking seriously, about how quickly things can go wrong when someone's obsessed. Hope hugged me. "I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you and Dad still got married." "Me too, kiddo. Me too." 20 years after Thomas's murder, Vanessa was eligible for her first parole hearing. I'd been preparing for this day for 2 decades. David and I drove to the prison, meeting Rachel and Thomas's sister outside. We'd all submitted victim impact statements. We'd all planned to speak if given the chance. The hearing room was small and institutional. Vanessa was wheeled in, older now, grayer, still in a wheelchair from the injuries that had never fully healed. She looked at us briefly, then looked away. The parole board asked her questions. Did she take responsibility for her actions? Yes. Did she understand the severity of her crime? Yes. Had she participated in rehabilitation programs? Yes. What would she do if released? She had no answer for that. Her responses were flat, rehearsed. She'd learned the right things to say, but there was no genuine remorse in her voice. Thomas's sister spoke first. "My brother has been dead for 20 years. He never got to open his restaurant, never got to get married or have kids or grow old. This woman took all of that from him because he didn't want to date her. She doesn't deserve freedom." Rachel spoke about the trauma of finding Thomas dying, about the nightmares that still woke her up sometimes. "I had to close my catering business. I couldn't work in kitchens anymore. She didn't just kill Thomas. She destroyed multiple lives." When it was my turn, I looked directly at Vanessa. "You turned what should have been the happiest day of my life into a nightmare. But more importantly, you murdered an innocent man. You've served 20 years. Thomas has been dead for 20 years. That's not enough time. It will never be enough time." The parole board deliberated for 30 minutes. When they returned, the answer was unanimous. Parole denied. Vanessa would remain in prison. Next review in 5 years. We walked out into the sunshine, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Justice, I thought. Not perfect, but real. David squeezed my hand, and we drove home to the life we'd built despite everything. The wedding that never happened became a distant memory, painful but no longer all-consuming. I'd learned to live with what had happened, to carry the weight of it without letting it crush me. Thomas's memory lived on through the foundation, through the chefs he'd inspired, through the changes in stalking laws that bore his name. Vanessa would die in prison, just as the judge had promised. And I would continue living, loving, fighting to make sure what happened to Thomas never happened to anyone else. That was the best justice I could give him. Years passed. More parole hearings, more denials. Vanessa grew old in prison while the rest of us grew old outside it. Hope graduated college, became a lawyer specializing in victims' rights. Thomas's foundation helped hundreds of students. Rachel opened a small bakery, finding peace in creating simple, beautiful things. David and I celebrated 30 years together, our courthouse wedding having been the right choice all along. On what would have been Thomas's 58th birthday, Dorothy's sister organized a memorial dinner at a restaurant one of his scholarship recipients had opened. Former students, friends, family, everyone whose life Thomas had touched gathered to remember him. Not as a victim, but as a talented chef, a good friend, a beloved son. I gave a toast. Thomas never got to live the life he deserved, but through everyone here, through every student helped by his foundation, through every life changed by the laws passed in his name, he's still making the world better. That's a legacy worth celebrating. We raised our glasses to Thomas, to Dorothy, to survival and justice and the long, difficult work of healing. The wedding that never happened had led to all of this, to advocacy, to change, to lives saved. It wasn't the ending anyone would have chosen, but it was an ending that mattered, and sometimes that's all we can ask for. Vanessa died in prison at 73, having never been granted parole. I didn't attend her funeral. I'd spent enough of my life thinking about her. She was gone, and Thomas was still remembered with love. That was justice enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.